Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Victoria Higgins, the Virginia Director with Chesapeake Climate Action Network Action Fund. Given that Virginia is the data center capital of the world, it will be no surprise that how to handle the industry's far-reaching impacts is a conversation that we expect to dominate the 2026 legislative session. Today, we're excited to release powerful new polling results outlining how voters feel about how data centers impact their lives and how they want decision makers to control those impacts. We have some surprising and instructive results. What might not be surprising is that Virginians are incredibly overburdened and worried about everyday costs and about pollution affecting their health and families. And in a moment, I'll go into detail about how voters see data centers driving those costs and that pollution. We are honored to be joined by Senator Perry and Delegate Maldonado, both of whom have been leaders in this space, pushing forward policy solutions that ensure that these big companies, not everyday people, shoulder the full tab for the immense energy infrastructure that they require. And we're also joined by Tanisha Griffin with New Virginia Majority, a leading civic engagement organization focused on empowering working class communities, including making sure that basic needs are affordable. So, onto the results. These results come from new polling from Global Strategy Group in partnership with CCAN Action Fund. And broadly, they show that Virginians connect the growth of data centers to higher power bills and view their environmental footprint and impact on energy costs as outweighing their economic value. More than their power company and more than the data center industry themselves, voters tend to hold state lawmakers chiefly accountable for failure to control these impacts. And that perspective fuels broad support for government intervention with a very strong openness to measures such as ensuring data centers absorb the costs that they create and requiring them to secure or finance clean energy to meet their electricity demand. About 3/4 of voters personally blame data centers for rising electricity costs in Virginia, and large and nonpartisan majority assign again that accountability for those data center driven rising costs onto lawmakers. It follows that 9 in 10 voters believe it's important for our state lawmakers to take action. Virginians do not like that big corporations are getting special tax breaks, and this is a tax break that is given with no assurance that these companies will be good neighbors and operate sustainably. Majorities also say they would be much more likely to vote for a lawmaker that supports making data centers pay their fair share for energy infrastructure instead of putting those costs on Virginia families, and more likely to vote for lawmakers that want to require data centers to directly fund expanding clean energy in Virginia to serve their energy needs without compromising our climate goals. And really critically, by a margin of over 2-1, voters do not buy the argument that data centers are ultimately an economic winner for real people. They see temporary jobs, they see higher costs, and they see more pollution. So those are the polling results. We will share a memo with the top lines along with the press release. I'd now love to pass it to Tanisha to discuss what this data center driven cost crisis means for working Virginians.
Victoria. My name is Tanisha Griffin, and I'm speaking on behalf of New Virginia Majority, where I serve as the environmental policy analyst. Our organization operates community organizing chapters in Loudoun County, Richmond, and Norfolk. Collectively, community organizers leading these chapters develop and mobilize tenant rights campaigns with renters from low-income Latino, Black, and immigrant housing communities. In New Virginia Majority, we believe every family deserves to find economic stability at home and in their community with access to affordable housing. Data centers have to be required to pay their fair share for the energy infrastructure they need to power today's AI boom. Otherwise, working Virginians, tenants who are exposed to rent hikes and reside in less energy efficient housing, are going to be forced to absorb the economic shock of steep increases in their monthly energy bills for years to come. We organize year round with renters statewide who are concerned about costly Dominion Energy electricity bills impacting their ability to pay rent, prevent late fees, and avoid eviction notices. Richmond, Norfolk, Hampton, and Newport News have some of the most exploitive rental markets not only in the state but the country. So our members find themselves at the center of the affordability crisis when it comes to household economic impacts of data centers in Virginia. Right now, renters on fixed incomes are watching their housing costs continue to balloon with the Dominion Energy bill hike just approved by the state at the behest of data center energy power demands. To illustrate the number of customers who may be dealing with the same energy cost crisis, Consider that nearly 1 in 10, 9.8% of customers have an annual income less than $20,000, or roughly $1,667 per month. 1 in 5, 18.6%, have an annual income less than $35,000, and approximately 1 in 4, 24.5%, have an annual income less than $45,000. When it comes to environmental health drawbacks, these same people are being targeted for next door fossil fuel plants proposed transparently by utilities to power big tech AI boom, such as the Chesterfield Energy Reliability Center, or CERC. Our members in Chesterfield are within a few miles from CERC, and they are now positioned to be paying the regional health tax for toxic air pollution from that power plant. The estimated total annual economic impact is around $88.5 million for people's anticipated out-of-pocket health expenses from increased cardiovascular and respiratory illnesses associated with breathing in toxic pollution from CERC each year. I have remarks also from one of our Richmond organizing chapter leaders who couldn't be here today, illuminating the negative impacts of data center costs on energy bills for renters in the city of Richmond. I want to send my testimony, and I have included my bill at the end. The truth is that the electricity bills are becoming too expensive. My husband and I don't use much electricity. We work all day, my children go to school, and everything is turned off. The only thing we can't turn off is our air conditioning because we can't be without heating at this time of year. The lights are turned off all day. The only thing we use is the heating. What we are earning is no longer enough to pay the electricity bills and rent, leaving us with less for food. It is unfair what they are doing to us because we work to pay for everything and have no money left at the end of the month. She enclosed her Dominion Energy bill due on February 3rd, 2026, and the amount is $761.82. And I have a photo of that is anonymous with the date that is due, with the amount, and the address that it's from, which is Dominion Energy, Richmond, Virginia. And I also have a remark from one of our Richmond Lead organizers, Rachel Hefner, on this issue as well. Over the past 4 years, I've heard these stories of countless community members who are shocked when they receive their utility bill each month. I have heard bills of multiple $100s, despite community members doing everything they can to reduce their electricity usage. No one should fear having their lights cut off, especially when our bill is subsidizing companies' bottom line. Our current utility bill structure is unjust, and it leaves ratepayers at the mercy of large corporations who use our coin to line their pockets. And I'll close with expressing our support for the state to take a close look at how everyday customers may be subsidizing infrastructure costs, primarily for data center industry, and to take decisive action to protect customers from this unfair burden. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanisha. Appreciate those remarks. I'd now love to introduce Senator Perry of Loudoun and Fauquier counties. Senator, thanks very much for coming.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me. The numbers in this poll are striking, but I'm not surprised. This polling is backed up by what I see and hear every single day from my constituents. Data centers and the energy costs they create are by far the number one issue I hear about in my district. And in fact, this fight, the one we're talking about, protecting ratepayers, was a winning issue in my district in this last election. And this issue isn't a partisan issue. I represent a purple district. Consistent with the polling, this is a top issue across the entire political spectrum. In a time of deeply divided politics, when is the last time you saw 90% of people agree about anything? To combat everyday people paying for data centers, last year I introduced a bill to direct the SEC to create a new customer class for data centers. Data centers and billion-dollar tech companies worked to kill that bill, but in December, the SEC still did part of what we asked them to do. I'm carrying a bill this session to finish that job. In the recent Dominion rate case, the State Corporation Commission created a new customer class for data centers. This was a big move toward fairness, but that decision only addressed rates, not the massive infrastructure costs for new transmission lines, substations, and grid upgrades driven by data center growth. So rates remain marginally fair, but cost shifting was not. The SEC's ruling focused on how data centers are billed for electricity usage. This bill focuses on the larger picture. Who pays for the power system built to serve them? Without this legislation, families and small businesses can still end up subsidizing the infrastructure, the lines, substations, and transmission projects needed for data centers, even if data centers are in a new rate class. I think the bottom line is that I spent a decade as a prosecutor holding powerful actors accountable. I brought that same commitment to the state Senate last year when I demanded fairness in data center rates, and I'm bringing it again this year. Virginia's working families didn't sign up to be big tech silent partners. This legislation ensures they won't be. I'd like to pass over to Delegate Maldonado. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Perry. Thank you, everyone, for being here today, and thank you for doing this hard work and this good work. I agree that this survey gives us some really interesting information that already confirms what we know. And what we know is that there is disparity in the cost sharing, the cost allocation. And we did last year. I'd like to call this bill the Pay Your Fair Share bill, was what we called it last year. But as many of you know, this particular version of the bill that I carried last year was killed in committee because the SCC in decision was pending. As Senator Perry mentioned, yes, we got part of the issue addressed, but not all of it. And bringing this bill back is making sure that we protect residential and other non-data center customers from subsidizing the construction of new transmission facilities that primarily serve data centers. That is a key portion of this because in the most recent Dominion rate decision, the SEC addressed some of the concerns related to generation cost subsidies, but it left specific transmission costs largely unaddressed. And so what happens is that we begin to quietly subsidize. We see our utility bills going up. We see other collateral and ripple effects coming up. And so we want to make sure that we put a mechanism in place that directs the State Corporation Commission to review and adjust the allocation of transmission costs during phase one and phase two with our electric utilities so that we protect our customers from rates increasing driven by data center growth. And that part doesn't have a long time to do it. We want that completed by January 1, 2027. And we're also encouraging another piece that's really interesting as we try to figure out what's the best way to ensure that we're using clean energy, the most efficient energy to be able to execute on some of these plans. So this bill also would address some considerations and calculations around the cost measures. So it encourages the SCC to use strong measures like direct cost allocation to specific data center customers to eliminate or minimize unreasonable subsidies, and to have 3 cost allocation proposals. So, and one of them is an ability to look at what happens when we have a surge in demand. And of the things that are going to be considered, one of them we want them to be an ability to look at what happens if we use different kinds of energy to source this. What's least cost prohibitive, most efficient, and we want all 3 of those things considered. This particular piece is known as the probability of dispatch methodology, which factors in the likelihood of electricity generated by any given facility that would be called into service. And how do we create the most complete picture is looking at what kinds of energy can we use to make sure we don't always have to go to generators, or when's the most efficient time to put generators on and which ones go on when we need them. So we're trying to look at a broader swath that makes sure that the cost allocation is fair with respect, especially to the transmission pieces that haven't been fully addressed. Now, all of this is happening in the context of 2 things. Last night, the president at the federal level made some announcements about pay obligations for data centers. We don't have a whole lot of information on that, but that's going to begin to seep into this conversation from the federal level down, from the state level, also from the federal level down. As many of you know, on December 11th of 2025, the president issued an artificial intelligence executive order, and one of the carve-outs in that order was the ability for states to kind of play in the sandbox of a data center sort of infrastructure and operations. So we've got a lot of things happening, not just at our local and state levels, but the federal actions are also impacting the conversation here. And so my hope is that we get to do this work and that these bills and pieces of legislation would be put in place so that we can protect our ratepayers and make sure that we are building out responsibly for Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Thank you, Senator. We now have some time for questions. I will say we borrowed the senator from caucus and needs to get to the floor, so we'll try and be brief. And if you do have A question for a particular speaker, feel free to make that known. You can submit via the Q&A or raise your hand. Charlie.
Hey everyone, thanks for doing this. I guess I wanted to see if there's any insight on how conversations with your chamber's leadership is going and what the likelihood of getting some of these across is.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I'm not certain if the question was directed towards me or not, but look, this is a conversation that is this issue is incredibly important to my district. And the bottom line is that we have a very slim majority in the Senate. And, those are kind of the facts. And I think that, we have an absolute obligation to be responsive to constituents and to people. As I said in my remarks, when 90% of people agree about anything, I think legislators have an absolute obligation to take note of it. And in this case, it's very specific. The people that voters are holding responsible for what is happening are state legislators. And I think that's a very specific and call to action for us. And so certainly I think that these will continue to be conversations that we continue to have in our caucus. And I think the pressure is on to do something about it. We certainly want to protect our majority, but we want to protect our constituents. And so I actually think that this polling helps to move the ball down the field and to push people to do something. But I would make a call to action to constituents, to people, call your legislators, call other legislators across the state and continue to put the pressure on them. Certainly I will and will continue to advocate to my leadership and to the other people in my caucus and to the people on the other side of the aisle. This is not a partisan issue. To get something done, I think that's our obligation to ratepayers and to the people. Democrats just came in a big election running on affordability. If this isn't about affordability, I don't know what is. And so I think, there's going to be a specific push to put your money where your mouth is and to do something for the people who voted you into office.
And we have a question in the chat. What is the risk to ratepayers if nothing changes?
I'll be happy to talk about that. And I think we see it isn't a question of we'll see more of the same. I think it gets worse in terms of impact and in terms of cost. So there is no status quo that remains in place by not taking action. The challenge is going to be how do we navigate what is allowed to do at state with the growing demand that has historically been decisions made at the local level, now bumping up and asking the states to set some guardrails and making sure we're doing that in a way that's fair and sustainable from an environmental standpoint, but also from sort of the standpoint of being able to provide energy that is clean and reliable. And we're not even meeting some of those needs right now that we anticipate having. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier before, the dynamics at the federal level and whether FERC will begin to sort of play a role too. There are 3 levels of government and 3 levels of conversation that are all converging at the same time. So I don't believe that that it is possible, it is appropriate. There's no option to do nothing. We must do something. And ratepayers, and all of us here today, we are ratepayers. We are customers. We are constituents, whether we're constituents at the federal, state, or local levels. And we do have a say and a right to begin to determine how we develop our economies and how we do that safely.
Thank you, Delegate. I understand the senator has to run to the floor, so thank you so much for joining us, Senator.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for putting this together.
We have a question from Lauren.
Yes, hello. So I'm curious, what obstacles or points of compromise do y'all expect when trying to introduce these bills to the General Assembly?
Thanks, Lauren. And do you mind stating your outlet and if the question is directed to a particular speaker or just for the general panel?
Yes, sorry. I'm Lauren. I'm with the Chesapeake Bay Journal. And Delegate Maldonado, if she's still here, I'd love to hear her answer.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I imagine that we will hear some of the same obstacles and opposition that we've historically heard. That it's going to hurt business, that data center providers won't be able to conduct their businesses easily, won't be able to afford to continue to stay in Virginia. That perhaps there is also a challenge in being able to work as quickly as we need to be able to have the sort of generation. What I think is going to be really paramount is for us to do a couple of things, however, in response. One, we do it is unlikely, in my estimation, that data centers that have already been built that they're not going to continue, but we may experience data center providers looking elsewhere geographically to go. So, but I don't know that that actually absolves them of having to address the issues, because wherever they go, this will likely they'll likely face and have to encounter some of these issues and the need to compromise and the need to do things a little bit differently. And then I think we also have to think about this sort of, bring your own generation, the ability to have substations built with these things so that we can sort of meet some of the demands. And the demands are now and they're future forward. So that is a piece, and that obviously is something that's not required of data centers right now. Although I've spoken with some and they don't mind helping with the generation piece, they don't mind building out substations. So there is tension and sort of compromises that need to be had between the utilities, the data center providers, and all of us who are making sure and kind of holding feet to the fire to make sure that we're doing this in the right way and that we are not paying a disproportionate burden of those infrastructure costs.
Thank you. Devlin. I saw a Devlin. Are you able to ask your question?
There we go. Is that working now?
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Devlin Epting with the Virginian Pilot. This is another question for Delegate Maldonado, if that's all right. I wanted to hear her thoughts on players like Dominion Energy being lobbyists for both sides of the aisle in Virginia politics, and whether that might be an inhibiting factor for this type of legislation to get passed.
Well, thanks for the question. I think that's a question that we get with lots of people across industries. Many businesses look at what is the spectrum, the panoramic view of their interests. And so I don't think what they're doing is anything new or anything distinct than other sort of big organizations that work with legislators, trying to figure out where are the places where they can move the ball forward. I do generally think it's really important to have bipartisan participation in these conversations. And so, I mean, certainly how you do that matters, but I think it's really important because climate, energy, all these things should not be party specific. As I'm sure everybody's heard before, there is no planet B. Like, we have to figure out how to do this together. So whether and a member of industry comes in and works with both people across the aisle and has different strategies with that, I think that legislators need to be eyes wide open. They need to be diligent. They need to continue to be open to educating themselves and learning about what's happening and the issue that they're being asked to consider. And then we move forward. And when there's conflict, then hopefully we will work through those together.
Thank you. I think there was a follow-up question. How can you emphasize to the viewers who are concerned about this? How can they speak up about this? I'll say working for an advocacy organization, there are so many opportunities over the next 58 days at this point to come to Richmond and to speak your piece to your lawmakers and to other lawmakers that are in positions of power in the legislature. So get in touch with your local advocacy organization. Excuse me. We're Chesapeake Climate Action Network Action Fund. We would welcome and help get anyone to Richmond who wants to advocate on this issue. You can also email your lawmakers. You can call your lawmakers. We've heard repeatedly from lawmakers who often want to do the right thing and are prepared to take the right votes, that they need to hear from their constituents that that's what they actually want in order to be empowered to take that action. So I would issue that call to action to any people that are concerned about their energy bills and are concerned about the proliferation of these large companies. And if Delegate, you're welcome to add on if you'd like to.
Yeah, I think all of those things are important and necessary. The other thing, if you're really passionate, you can also come to committee and testify. You can let your voice be heard and stand before the committee in support of a bill, in opposition to a bill. And if you can't come in person, you can do it via Zoom, or you can even provide written testimony. So I think there's an all of the above approach that allows you to be an active participant in this.
Thank you, Delegate. We've got time for one more question, and then I'll also say, Delegate, do you have your bill number on hand if you want to shout that out for people to call in and say they support that bill?
Yes, it is HB 658.
Okay, great.
HB 658.
Thanks very much. All right, do we have any final questions before we wrap up here? Charlie.
Hey everyone, thanks again. I guess I was just wondering, does this maybe drum up support for changing renewables energy siting in the state? You know, there was some efforts last year to address that. There's some more proposals this year. The supply side of the equation is certainly a problem, I guess, with this. So I guess would this drum up support for renewable energy siting across the state, or?
What I would say as a clean energy advocate is that clean is cheap. So if you are looking to serve electricity demand in the most cost efficient way, you need to invest in clean energy and you need to create a pathway for clean energy to get online. And Delegate, you're also welcome to speak to this.
I don't have anything to add to that. I think that's absolutely right. We need to be looking at an all of the above approach.
All right, I think we are out of time. Thank you again for joining us. We will follow up with our press release with a link to the polling results. I want to thank the delegate for joining us. I want to thank the senator for joining us, and hope you all have a good weekend. Thanks very much. And thank you, Tanisha.
Okay. Thank you.